Hi folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. Oh, thank you for those of you that joined in last night's live stream. I thought it went really well. It just seemed to be almost more pleasant than even normal. And they're all good, but last night was just an enjoyable live stream. If you didn't see it, you can still go back and watch it. Here either on Rumble or YouTube. It's still at both places. A lot of stuff is going on as we speak over in Taiwan and China, and I'm not saying that World War III is getting ready to kick off any moment there, but I think there's a good chance of it. If you haven't been following it in the last few days, well, it's all response to Taiwan's president meeting with the Speaker of the House here in the United States, and then a delegation of U.S. lawmakers going over to Taiwan. And China said, don't do it, or there'll be repercussions. And so now they're dealing with that. There's something running through the woods. Anyways, so what China has done is, in a sense, really a naval blockade of Taiwan. That's not what they're calling it. They're saying that they're out doing some training and maneuvers. And there's a bunch of Chinese naval ships that's completely surrounded the island. And there's also a U.S. carrier group, I believe it's the Nimitz, is right in the midst of all of them. There's maps out there showing their approximate locations around the island, and they're not too far from each other. Also, Taiwan has gone on full alert. There's a bunch of warplanes involved, 70 some, I believe, Chinese warplanes circling over Taiwan, and they released a kind of a CGI simulation, China did, of them basically invading Taiwan today. Things are heating up over there. As of this morning, it was being reported that there was a stalemate of 10 Chinese ships and 10 Taiwanese ships in some sort of a stalemate over there, out in the oceans. This kind of stuff is heating up over there, and definitely worth taking notice, because we've all been waiting for the moment that China decides to make its move on Taiwan, whether it's an actual invasion or just a blockade of the island. Either one could certainly happen. There's a lot of little factors that's going in that's kind of indicating that there's a chance, probably a greater chance this time, that this is real and not just training versus other times. Number one, the weather and the seas over there right now are being reported as excellent. April is generally, from what I understand, the most calm time of the year for the seas there around the Taiwanese Strait. So China would have that going for them. North Korea, and this is one that a lot of people just don't seem to be paying much attention to. So North and South Korea, ever since the Korean War, as much as they are at odds with each other, they have this system of reporting to each other on a daily basis. Usually at least once or twice a day, there's a phone conversation between diplomats of North and South Korea. So there is a constant line of communication. And this has always been this way. In the last few days, North Korea stopped picking up the phone. They will not receive any phone calls from South Korea. That one's kind of interesting. And then this past week, France's President Macron went and met with Xi Jinping, supposedly to try to convince China to convince Russia to stop their war in Ukraine. And then this morning, Macron, or whatever his name is, said that Europe needs to quit being so dependent on the United States. They need to end their dependency on the United States so that if and when the United States gets dragged into a war with China over Taiwan, that Europe doesn't end up becoming involved in it also. Very interesting timing that he says that after meeting with Xi Jinping. Almost like he got his marching orders from the big Pooh Bear. There's a lot of stuff happening there, folks, and I know, because I agree with it, that many of you are going to say, yeah, but China they're not quite ready yet. They're not quite ready to take us on in battle. They're not quite ready to be the world's reserve currency and the world leader. That's an argument, definitely. But number one, we don't really know how ready the Chinese are. And certainly you can't depend on our intelligence, because so many times they're wrong, or they just don't even know that it's happening. I mean, look at all this stuff in Saudi Arabia. It just came out this week that the CIA chief went over to meet with Saudi Arabian leaders because they were shocked. The CIA, our intelligence, was shocked that Saudi Arabia was cutting all this oil back and working on all this peaceful diplomacy with its neighbors. It caught them off guard. Our intelligence community, I don't think, is quite as amazing as Hollywood wants us to believe. So there's no way that we can truly know what all China has. What we know that China has or doesn't have is what China wants us to know. So we always have to remember that. We also have to remember that when a superpower is on its way out, the one that's coming to take its place doesn't necessarily have to be more powerful. They just have to have the will to take over. There was a independent study that came out this past week, that if the United States was involved in a two-front war, and when it very specifically said, even if nothing changes in Ukraine, where we're not actually fighting, actively ground forces fighting, that we're just doing what we've been doing, sending munitions and money over to Ukraine, and then we find ourselves involved fighting China, that this report estimates that we would have about a week's worth of missiles and not too much more of things like artillery shells before we depleted our supplies. The report went into pretty great detail of how, since it's been so long since we've been in a big war, basically since World War II, that our military leaders have had a real difficult time estimating how much munitions we would go through in a large-scale war. And they're finding out with Ukraine that they're going through way, way more than they ever thought they would. It listed in the report that Ukraine is going through about 7,000 artillery shells a day, every day. And that it would be very difficult for us to immediately increase our productions to meet that demand. Meaning that if someone like China was able to take us on and do a lot of damage real quick and then just kind of drag it out, that we would run out of ammunition long before we could get our supply chains up and running enough to build back our supplies. And you also have to factor in that it's not like it was 70, 80 years ago. A lot of the resources for those supplies we import in. So there are a lot of, I think, factors that would indicate it would be a really good time for China to make its move. And here we see it doing what amounts to a naval blockade around Taiwan, a standoff, a stalemate between China and Taiwan. And we've got our ships and planes and stuff in the big mix. This is really just a big recipe for disaster. Now, the day could come and go and nothing happened. But at some point, something almost has to kick off. It just almost has to, and here's the reason why. China, this isn't a conspiracy, folks. China is most definitely trying to establish itself as the new world leader. We've seen that especially over the last couple of weeks of what China has been doing around the world with building relationships and establishing trade outside of the US dollar. China is definitely attempting to become the world leader. And the rest of the world is probably sitting by and waiting and watching and wanting to know how this goes. And if China continually backs down from threats, remember when Nancy Pelosi went over there and there was all kinds of threats that they may shoot down her plane, or they may, put her into custody, not allow her to leave, all these kinds of things. And then nothing happened. If China continues to do that, the rest of the world, these countries that are kind of on the fence of whether to be on China's side or our side, are going to start saying, well, maybe China's not quite ready for this yet. Maybe they're not quite ready to take over, because they keep making these threats. And the United States calls their bluff and China backs down. If China really is intent upon taking over as the world leader, at some point they have to stand their ground and cross that point of no return. They have to. They have to, or their chance at prominence, their chance at other countries realizing that they are the new big boys on the block, it's gonna wane, and they're gonna lose that and miss that opportunity, and may not have that opportunity again for a generation or two. And I would say that China knows that. They are very smart. They're very methodical. And so at some point, no matter how much they're ready, if they keep making these threats and keep pushing this, they have to make the move. Even if they're still smaller in size and power than the United States, they have to make their move. It's a gamble. And for them to show the rest of the world that they're ready to be the new world leader, they sometimes have to go against odds and take on the top dog on the street. And so it's quite possible, not guaranteed, but it's possible that the things that we're seeing happen right now in this moment over in Taiwan could be the very thing that leads into a war. Personally, and this is a total guess, don't hold me to this necessarily. I mean, if you can come back on here in the next couple of days and say, you were wrong, that's fine, I was wrong. My guess is that, because they say, China says that this is just a 3-day training thing, and I think today is the 3rd day. My guess is when it's officially over, that the ships that are surrounding Taiwan will probably just stay. They announced this week that they're going to start stopping all ships going through the Taiwanese Strait and inspect them. And so, even though that's not a full blockade of the island, now that they've got their ships, including aircraft carriers surrounding the island, why back down from that? That's going to look kind of weak. Why not just keep them there? That's what I suspect will probably happen, that they'll just keep their ships there, and little by little we'll watch a blockade happen. At first it may not be a blockade. At first they'll just be inspecting ships and patrolling the waters, and then little by little it'll just be a full blockade. And that's a real big problem, because as much as Taiwan has, they have it's for a small island, they have a pretty stout military. And the problem is they can't produce hardly anything on their own. All the resources have to come into that island, and they only have about a few days at most of things like fuel and energy to keep the lights on and to keep the planes and the ships and the tanks and stuff going. So they don't even really have to fight them in a big war. They just have to have a successful blockade of the island, and it won't take very long until Taiwan starts starving and they start having, no medical supplies, no electricity, and then the negotiations will start, or a war starts. Here's the thing. Let me end on this. All this stuff that we're talking about with the dollar weakening and losing its prominence, and China stepping up, and all this stuff, it seems to be going at a pace. Some may call it slow, some may call it fast, but either way, there's a certain kind of rhythm and cadence that it's moving at. That could all change very rapidly with a very quick war between China, Taiwan, and the United States. The United States this week said again that if China invades Taiwan, that we would most likely send troops over. Not like with Ukraine, that we would actually directly be involved. And so this big timeline of collapse and dollar and finances and banking could start moving very, very, very rapidly and change very quickly if we start to get directly involved against China in a war over Taiwan. There's a lot of things happening, folks. Things are getting crazy and moving pretty quick. Just all the more reason for you to get your houses in order and start preparing mentally, physically, and spiritually. Thank you for watching. Catch you in the next video. Folks, we are living in uncertain times where chaos seems to be around every corner. With wars and rumors of wars, economic collapse, pandemics, and more, we should strive daily to become more prepared mentally, physically, and of course spiritually. Please check out My Patriot Supply for all your preparedness needs. My Patriot Supply offers Ready Hour food, Alexa Pure water filters, and many other emergency and survival products. My Patriot Supply is an American-owned company, run by Americans producing American-made food. Emergency food from My Patriot Supply has a 25-plus year shelf life. It's simple to fix and delicious to eat. With My Patriot Supply, you can sleep at ease at night, knowing that you and your family have the emergency food to last through the coming times. To find out more, click on the link in the description below or go to preparewithtravis.com.